Greetings. Our meeting will start shortly. I will be stopping the recording until we start. So we will see you back soon. I can.
Who's on?
Hi there. Hey, Howard.
Hi, nice. Is it Dennis?
It is Dennis.
How's life out in Arizona?
Better than it was in Wisconsin. They were getting snow today. I don't know about you guys up in Minnesota, but my wife was whining. It's only going to be 70 today. It's chilly.
70 still warm.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, she was wearing a sweatshirt and long pants today because it was chilly at 70.
I wonder how many other Halsey Hall members will be joining us tonight.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. Ken Carano's on. Not sure where Ken's from.
Ken's in Gurnee, Illinois.
Gurnee. Okay. Hey, Ken.
It snowed here too. Not too much. It's already melted.
Yeah.
You're at the
That
home
works.
of Great America.
I could walk there actually. I choose not to, but I could walk there.
Is it still open?
It hasn't been open all year, but it's opening I think Friday for their winter festival. They put up a lot of lights, and I think the rides go too. At least some of them do, but it's mainly for walking around outside.
Yeah. With malls all hurting so much, it's you never know.
True.
Well, so you heard about the shooting, Dennis, in Milwaukee at the shopping mall.
Yeah, I haven't followed. My wife has. I keep asking her, do we know what happened? It was a 15-year-old kid and they got 3 people arrested for it, but I've been kind of busy all day, so I haven't had a chance to follow up on it. But like everybody else says, it happens somewhere else, and then when it happens where you are, it's like, oh my God,
I remember that mall, Mayfair. Been there a few times when in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife's family is from West Bend, and she was quite concerned when she heard the news.
Yeah. Yeah. I just moved here from West Bend, Ken. I lived in West Bend for the last 15 years and moved to Arizona in August.
Well, congratulations on the move. I mentioned your name to one of my brothers-in-law, and it sounded familiar to him. Do you know Bob Meyer?
Yeah, I know Bob. Well.
He's my brother. He's my brother-in-law.
Bob is one of the credit unions. Trying to think which one now.
Yeah, he's not with any of them anymore.
Oh, okay. Because I was president of Glacier Hills Credit Union in West Bend.
Oh, okay.
And so I know Bob from Credit Union land and also his association with West Bend baseball.
Yes, he's been very involved with West Bend baseball.
Yeah. So I knew him in both places. Matter of fact, they once considered me to join their board, but they went in a different direction. I was connected in the community, but not so much with baseball. And even though I probably had a stronger baseball background than some, but which was okay. I was busy. I would have been fun to have been on it, but I was so busy with other things, might not have been able to give the time they needed anyhow. So
sure.
So, yeah.
Wait, the video on.
Pardon me? Oh, there you are.
Video on. Unless I should turn it off because.
No, I've got mine off because I stopped the video when I sign in early rather than have people watching us do the general jabber beforehand. So I got the video started. So when we start, if I don't say something, okay, guys, I'm starting the video, stop me because we had a book club meeting and 10 minutes into the meeting, I forgot to start the video up. So
maybe I'll turn my video off.
Yeah, no, you can have yours on. I just can't I don't want the recording of the meeting. I usually we don't need all this because the recording I put in the newsletter and I share with people, so they don't need to hear all our goofy talk, although sometimes it's pretty good. So. Hey, Rick's out there, I see.
It's Rick.
Yeah.
Rick Shabowski, nice to see you.
Nope, he doesn't have his mic on.
You don't, well, he'll get it on.
Yeah.
And Dan Dorf is on too.
Yeah,
from
good stuff, Dan.
Hey, Howard.
I had a very good conversation with our guest yesterday, talking about this meeting. I'm really I've been excited about this meeting. I've been working on this for months, and after talking to him yesterday, I'm even more excited. Sounds like he'll be very, very interesting, and his involvement, he can talk about all kinds of stuff. So.
And who's on that Galaxy Tab A right now?
Yeah.
Who's on?
Yeah. Who's the Galaxy Tab A? Probably the last one to sign in. You would know that.
Bob Komorowski,
Hey, Bob.
Minneapolis. Hi, Howard.
Hiya, Bob.
How are you tonight?
Good. Just thought to hear some baseball talk tonight.
Same here. Yeah.
Not a lot on primetime television. The movie.
And how is this different than most nights? Don't you want to hear baseball talk most nights?
Of course.
Yeah.
Even during the off season.
Yeah. Yes. As long as I get all these, things sent by MLB about all the things that are going on, most of which I really don't care about right now, caring about, so who's the person who's going to win the Cy Young next year? I don't know. I don't even want to think that far ahead. So Bob Beege, as he just made it on.
I'm more interested in spring training. If there's going to be a spring training, and if there's going to be a vaccine, so I can go to Arizona.
Yeah. I noticed our guest Tom Flanagan just signed in. Hi, Tom.
How you doing, guys?
Yeah.
I'll pop my video on if I can get it going here.
Yeah, I'm not recording the meeting yet. I'm waiting till we get started. We got another 8 minutes, so and people are signing in. I don't know if you just heard that question. I think it's the same question you have. So will there be spring training next year? And probably everybody and their brother is wondering the same thing.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We're hearing all kinds of different things, but it's quite frankly probably just too early to tell. I think there'll be a big league spring training. It's just a matter of whether they tweak the dates on it or not. We'll see.
Yeah, and if fans can go to it.
Yeah, that'll be the big question. Still, I guess we got a ways to go to see where the virus goes. Hopefully, they get it under control here sooner than later.
Yeah. Well,
Tom will be happy to know that my last live baseball game that I went to was Brewers exhibition game at Maryvale against the Angels. I believe it was on the 12th of March.
Okay, that had to be right at the end then.
Yeah, right. It was right before everything hit the fan, and spring training was shut down. I think a day or two later, the NBA announced that they were shutting down, and that really set everything in motion, though, as I recall.
Yeah, it closed up quick. It was a Wednesday night. I remember the NBA stuff went down, and then the next day we were kind of working through it ourselves. It really went quick.
Yeah, I was at it was a Sunday afternoon game. Maybe that was the 9th or so. It was a Sunday afternoon game against the Angels, so at Maryvale. I got to see all the renovations and everything that were done. Though the park looks nice, though.
Yeah, park really turned out nice. It did. If you were there
Especially
before the renovations, which I'm sure a lot of you guys were, night and day from.
Yeah, especially the exterior. I noticed right when I walking in from the parking lot, though, the exterior just looked totally different, though.
Yeah, no doubt.
I would like to see the clubhouse because I was there for the 2005 fantasy camp. So I was in the clubhouse and enjoyed the fantasy camp experience. So I know that what the inside looked like then, but it's been completely remodeled and probably a whole lot nicer.
Yeah, it's. I'm not sure if they're going to have to do some work at Miller Park. As nice as the Miller Park clubhouse is, it's probably second fiddle to the spring training clubhouse right now. So good problems to have, I guess. Can't complain.
Yeah. Well, and knowing major league ball players, some of them will whine about that. So yeah. They may have to do something.
Yeah, the guys, I mean, to a man, I remember when the place opened up, everybody was just pinching themselves after being in the old place, and
Yeah.
it really wasn't that old. It just was small. I mean, it just kind of, outgrew it, but it was, one player to the next just couldn't believe the improvements they made.
Well, I do remember the Brewers used to train in Sun City.
Apparently the spring training facilities
do,
are
I-
really nice now.
Yeah, I had never made it to Sun City, but I do know they were there.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
to Chandler. Chandler is as far back as I've been to in spring, but
Yeah, it was not much of a ballpark, didn't even have any covering over it. So everybody was out in the sun. It was like almost like a high school ballpark. I never made it to Sun City. I live in Sun City now, but I never made it to Sun City when it was a going concern. So yeah.
Bob Uecker once said about Sun City, the average age in Sun City is deceased.
Yeah. There are days like if you like going to the Walgreens, is never fun because you walk in the Walgreens and you see people who are a lot older than you are, and all you can think is, so that's what I'm going to look like in 10 years walking into the store. It's a little spooky. So. And when I say that, of course, my lovely wife Linda says, "What do you mean 10 years?" Which I always appreciate. So
I started going down to Arizona about 18 years ago or so. And I felt rather old at the time, though. But now I fit right in here, though. After aging a bit here and being retired.
We gotta say hi to Bob, by the way. Your mic isn't up. Bugie. His mic isn't up.
Bob usually, it says muted, I think. Hi, Bob.
Hi.
Hi, gentlemen.
Bob?
Am I
Hi.
unmuted?
Hello, Bob.
You are now.
Okay, good. I see Francis. I see Rick. I see Galaxy Tab A.
That's Bob.
That's also Bob Komorowski in Minneapolis with Halsey
Okay.
Hall chapter.
Hi.
Hello.
Daniel Dorf.
We got two Bobs. And there's Dan.
I'm here.
Yeah. Bob Russin just signed in, so we got three.
Never have enough.
Bob,
Hello.
Hi, Francis.
and all the rest of you getting to be familiar faces.
Yeah.
Dennis is hiding tonight.
I've got the recording stopped, or I think maybe I have it going and I stopped the video. I may have stopped the wrong thing. Oh, we've been recording all this. Let me stop that. Okay, greetings everybody. Welcome to what I'm calling Down on the Farm with Tom Flanagan, the Vice President of Minor League Operations for the Brewers. And before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. Number one is don't forget the book club meeting on December 9th with Jane Levy, talking about her book, Big Fella. I know, Mary, I don't know how far you're into the book. I'm enjoying the book a whole lot more than I thought I would. It's not your typical book about Babe Ruth. I've learned about chickens, and I learned about the whole PR business. It's really a very good history book about what was happening in the 20s. And
You learn a lot about players' fines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No, it's a page turner.
yeah. So Jane will be joining us on September 9th. So remember that. December, the only meeting we have scheduled right now for December is with Jane. I'd like some opinions, you guys, offline. If you can send emails on there. One of the things I'm thinking about, we used to do a holiday party. It's hard to do a holiday party when you have to do it by Zoom, but we could do a holiday party of some type, get together and just talk baseball or nonsense, which is not different than what we usually do. So I don't know if that sounds good. I've got a couple ideas I can work on, but there's a thought on that. So let me know how you guys feel about that. Or we could find a speaker and do that.
There's always time to talk about baseball.
Yeah, I know. Howard came on and said, it's a good night to talk about baseball. And I had to ask him, is there any night that's, so, but, yeah. And then with the number of people we have on, I think we're fine with leaving the mic open. So we'll leave the mic open. If you have a question and you want to ask Tom, are they okay asking the question?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
If you like to put it in the chat, I will pay attention to chat and ask the questions when an appropriate time comes up. So that's all I have for housekeeping. Unless there's any questions, it's my pleasure to introduce Tom Flanagan, the Brewers Vice President of Minor League Operations. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you,
Before
Dennis.
we get
Appreciate
started, you betcha. Thank you for yesterday's conversation. I felt so good about this meeting after talking to you yesterday. It was just, I had fun just yesterday. I can't wait for today. He's a Wisconsin-born kid, born in Milwaukee, raised in New Berlin, pitched for New Berlin Eisenhower High School, attended UWM, and he's been with the Brewers for 31 years. The good news is he has had more than, he's had more jobs than working for the Brewers, one, and in high school. But so he's been at the Brewers since 1990, starting as a bat boy. During college, was when you were club attendant during college years?
Yep.
Yep. And then after that, and there's probably some stories just on that alone, I would guess. He moved into baseball operations in 1996, and that's where he's been ever since. He went through, I did a project for SABR, capturing all of the media guide front offices going back to the beginning of the franchise. And Tom went through what I call the corporate job title changes. And it was kind of fun. I told him I've been stalking him for the last year, because when I put this whole thing together, I knew he was from Wisconsin, kept watching him, is advancing and typing his name in there. So he went into baseball operations, and he was a baseball operations assistant. Then he became an assistant director of scouting in 2000. And I know there's some good stories there. Then he moved up to the next level. They always call him senior director. And that was a baseball operations in 2006. And in 2005, he was named the farm director. And it was at this year or late last year, you became the VP of minor league operations, correct?
Yeah, last year.
Cool. Tom is married. He and his spouse, Jennifer, have a son and a daughter. And the question I would like to start out the meeting with Tom is, can you tell me how the bat boy became farm director and a vice president heading the minor leagues?
It's a real good question. I often pinch myself and ask me that on occasion of myself. So, but no, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Just a couple of ground rules. I'll take any questions you have, give you the best answer I have. And with Zoom, I know it's not always the most easy way to communicate. So don't feel bad if you interrupt while I'm talking to ask a question. That's probably how it's got to be on Zoom. So feel free to chime in as we go, or at the end, or whenever fits what you're trying to ask. But I look forward to hearing from everybody, telling you a little bit about myself and what I do, and certainly want to leave the bulk of the time for questions. I'll probably give, a brief overview just to kind of get some thoughts flowing on the farm system and what the farm director really does. But I'm just going to use that as a way to hit on areas that hopefully generate questions from you guys. If you want to hear more about a certain area, fire away. I just didn't want to have a prepared, 30-minute, 40-minute rant, and then everybody's kind of staring at the wall wondering when this guy's going to wrap up. So feel free to poke me into the areas that you want to hear about. I recognize many of the faces from being around the ballpark. I've seen Bob before, certainly Rick around there. So I know those guys share the opinion. Any day spent at the ballpark is a good day. So I've been very fortunate, the bulk of my life being able to call it work, which I know is a blessing to begin with. So I'll start there. But just to get going, as Dennis touched on, my path was a very unique one, being a local guy, ending up 30 years at one organization. I just turned 48 this month, so it's really it's all I know really is the Brewers. So it's a proud feeling, but it's kind of that surreal feeling as well. So basically, just to get right into kind of the farm director aspect of it, in this role, many of you probably have a feel for it already, but I'll hit some things that'll probably be a refresher for you. Obviously, the 30,000 foot level, your main function is to oversee the minor league system. So that encompasses a lot. We have, a vast system of staff and players to oversee, and you're really trying to create an environment ultimately for the players to succeed in, which sounds a lot easier than it is. So we try to create processes that can apply to big buckets of players, just because the volume of players coming through is so high, and we're trying to whittle them down help them individually, but again, as part of the Brewers way or the Brewers organization. And you hear that term a lot, the Cardinals way, the Royals way. Everybody seems to have their way, and they're probably a lot more similar than different. But every organization prides itself in doing a little bit more or stressing things that we feel are more important to the Brewers mantra. Obviously, with Craig Counsell as our manager, that's a great motivator, I think, for our players, the type of player he was, and a grinder type local guy himself. That's blue collar player, has been in a bunch of World Series, and I think that stay connected mantra that you guys have heard Craig talk about is something we preach, overarching of all our players. But again, our goal is not only to get guys to the big leagues, which makes sense, it's also to make them the best they can be, because they're valuable for us in many other ways. Obviously in trades, in acquisitions, the Christian Yelich trade doesn't happen without players. And, you can trace those trades back several layers, and it's maybe Jonathan Lucroy led to a few of those pieces. He was a draft pick of ours in 2007. Other players that we've accumulated and developed, you're kind of recycling these players and trying to maximize their value. So the farm director's role is really one of many. It's not one person. It's not myself. It's a team of people. So I'll take you through kind of the staff first, just to kind of give you guys a sense of how large the operation is. It's total number of players. I looked this up before I got on here just to make sure, because it does ebb and flow. We're probably at one of the lowest numbers right now, just the way 2020 went with a limited draft. We only had 5 rounds and then a few free agents, and we didn't really sign a ton of free agents yet in terms of the minor league side. So we have 230 players right now, and that's on the low end. We've gotten as high as 280, 290 at times, depending on the point of the season you're in. So it's a huge number of players. About 170 of those players right now are what I call the U.S. based players. They're not all necessarily born and raised in the U.S., but just players that have graduated over to the U.S. So it could be a player from the Dominican or Venezuela that's made it to AA. They're basically in our U.S. based group of affiliates. And then there's another 60 players at our Dominican program. Right now they're at home. Nobody's at our complex. It's shut down basically for the holidays and because of COVID. Normally we would have some off-season programs going on there. But anyway, just to give you a snapshot, 230 total players, and then staff, which is my right-hand people that I rely on. We have different levels of people, but in a nutshell, just to simplify, we have roving coordinators, which are basically the lieutenants. We have one in charge of pitching, hitting, outfield base running. We have a field coordinator. We have kind of a creativity guys, our development initiatives. So there's about 8 different categories of rovers that kind of have a specialty that they work with all of our minor league players. And those are the guys that I deal with probably the most in terms of making sure our processes and things are followed. And then beyond them, there's an additional 60 more player development staff people. And those people reside at each of our affiliates. For instance, AAA, the last year we had it was San Antonio. Next year, it'll probably be a new affiliation. We're not quite sure where we'll be yet. Probably be a little bit better setup for us. The way things are, the rumor mill is going. It sounds like it's going to be a little bit better facility, better setup for AAA. But anyway, at that AAA club, just to give you guys a breakdown of how this basically rolls out, those 60 staff people, there's a manager, hitting coach, pitching coach, a 4th coach, which does a little bit of everything, usually handles base running, outfield play, whatever that guy's specialty is. And then an athletic trainer, a strength and conditioning person, what we call an ISP intern. It's an intern level person. That's integrative sports performance. They're the real smart guys that have a measurement on everything and really bring a lot to the table in terms of nutrition, kind of melding strength and conditioning and the unseen aspects of athletes, trying to maximize their performance basically in a broad sense. They're on each club. And then we have the last spot is a development coach, which is very part-time-ish position. That is basically someone we've identified that could be a future full-timer for us. We bring them in for a year as a development coach to try and develop them, see what we have, and then we've hired some of those people full time in the years that follow. So that's kind of a breakdown. If you run that across our whole system, we have 4 full season clubs. So 4 times 6, that's roughly 24 folks there. And then we have 2 teams in Arizona, and then a team and a half. We have a co-op team in the Dominican. So a lot of teams, a lot of players, a lot of moving parts. So that's kind of the boring, how big this thing is. But what ties us together in all this is everybody's different. No 2 players. We put guys in buckets in terms of, for example, we might have a velocity development group, a group of pitchers that we identify as, not only do we want these guys to throw harder, but usually you do want most guys to throw harder, but these guys have some ingredients that would lend themselves to either physical development that they can do to lead to better velocity, or something in their basically in their talent base that shows us they can throw harder, and they'll be in that bucket. Then another group of guys may be in, pitch development bucket. So there's different things, games within the games, that we do to try and help guys, but we realize no 2 people are the same. Their development isn't necessarily linear. It's not a straight line to, hey, you're drafted and you're going to the big leagues. It's going to be up, down, up, down. That's the way human beings are. They have different rates of achievement, success, all that stuff. So it's a really big puzzle. It's quite the challenge. And what seems to find its way into all of this, the development process, is kind of troubleshooting or putting out fires, because you're literally dealing with players that are, from Latin America, that are 16, 17-year-old, all the way up to some minor league players that are in their low 30s. So you got quite a different, age group. Granted, the bulk of them are on the younger side, but it's different people. Hey, they're traveling, they're on their own for the first time. So it's a little bit of that father figure as well, where you're kind of letting these guys grow up in the game, but also knowing that, hey, you're creating solid citizens, you're creating grown-ups, and you want to teach them not only what's right on the team and what's right by their teammate, but you want to help them educationally, things of that nature. So there's a lot of programs that we do beyond the on the field to try and help these guys, better themselves for whatever they end up being. Obviously, players from Latin America, very easy, straightforward. Hey, let's teach them the language. So when they sign and come to our complex, they're learning English basically from the get-go and get tested. We have programs where they can earn a general equivalency degree if they haven't had that opportunity in Latin America. Some players in Phoenix can go to Grand Canyon University on scholarships that we set up for them to get educated while they're in Phoenix, finish off a degree, pursue different, certificates, things of that nature. So it's really like you're raising kids. They just happen to be really good at baseball is a component of this as well. So that's kind of the all over the map, 30,000 foot level. Now, just some other areas that people are interested in, the number of programs. People think of player development, oh, it's the minor leagues, it's the in-season minor league season and playoffs, and that's it. Well, it's turning into probably an 11 or 12 month ordeal in a normal season. Right now with COVID, obviously everything's turned upside down, so it hasn't been that way. We've done a lot more virtual, a lot more. We're all better at Zoom than we were 9-10 months ago, but it's been like the last, I would say, probably 2 to 3 years, we've really stretched out the off season, where we've added a number of different programs, both in the winter and in the fall, that not all of our players participate in, but enough of them participate that we identify that we feel we can really help these guys kind of accelerate their development, whether it justifies younger and younger players, it seems like, making their debut, not spending as much time in the minor leagues or not. I don't know that it justifies that. I think that's just an industry push. But just to take you through kind of a normal season, just starting at spring training, just take you through this. This may lead to additional questions if you have any. But basically, as a lot of you know, big league spring training, pitchers and catchers, everybody can't wait to hear those words, generally report in February. Well, in par with that, or lined up with that, we have what's called minor league early camp. We generally bring about 60 players into big league camp. and it's, the 40-man roster and then roughly 20 non-roster invites. Some will be our guys, meaning they're just non-roster invites in our system. Other guys are contractually obligated. We sign a player, for instance, this offseason as a minor league free agent, and we add an invite to big league camp. So that's like a non-roster invite that comes from another organization. He's our property because we signed him, but previously he hadn't played for us. So there's about 60 in big league camp. And then in addition to that, on the minor league side, we bring in a pool of players for what we call minor league early camp. Pretty much as basic a name as I guess we could call it. But basically those are the players you see going over to the big league side to support the big league spring training game. So in other words, Bryce Terang, he's not in big league camp in 2020. He must have played in probably 10 major league spring training games, or at least was on the bench for him. So it's a great opportunity for our young players. We call it going across the street, even though we're in the same building. That kind of dates from the old complex days when you literally would walk across the parking lot to get to the big league side. So that's kind of our first program, is this minor league early camp. So chronologically, a player like Bryce Terang may show up February 15th or 20th, and he's in spring training up until April 1st or whatever the minor leagues begin. So it's a full 6 weeks of prep, game time, that type of thing. Now the minor league season runs one less month basically than the big league season. Generally we play 140 games, and AAA may play 142, I believe it is. But generally of the full season teams, it's 140, whereas the big leagues is 162. So you lop off September in the big leagues. You're still playing minor leagues, start their playoffs, and they're done. Usually early September, right around Labor Day. So that's kind of the traditional what everybody thinks of. But in addition to that, what we've started to do, and we're not alone. I'm not saying we're ahead of a lot of teams on this, but teams forever have been running what's called instructional league. We just had that program. Even with COVID, we had about 55, 56 players down in Phoenix for that. And that's generally first and second year players for the most part that we feel need some extra, education, extra seasoning in terms of the basics. So kids that are right out of the draft or played maybe one full season or a half a year, they come into instructional league, and it's really like spring training in some ways. There's a work component to it, and then there's a game component. So players will work out in the morning, and then by 1 o'clock, there'll be an afternoon game. So it's a long day. We divide it up into more or less two teams, so to speak. So you can really work guys on the days they aren't in games and give them a little less on the days they're playing in the game. So that's a program that, again, isn't anything new. That's been going around for a long time. And shortly after instructs, we generally give the bulk of our players a break. But what we've started to do the last several years is, and we did it a little bit, I should say, before I was in this role, but it was a little bit different design and setup. But again, we're not real good on fancy names. We call them winter programs. But basically after instructs, give the guys a little breather, and then usually November, December, there'll be a small group of a dozen, maybe 24 players of generally younger guys that we identify as either pitchers that we target as, hey, this guy's got the ingredients to add velocity. Let's put him in this velocity type program at our complex. So they'll come in, they'll do a lot of weight training, really emphasis on throwing harder. So they'll take advantage of that off season. We'll kind of ramp them up from December right into spring training. So some of these guys, it's basically turned into a 12-month a year development opportunity, which naturally has some risks because your body's not resting like some people need. And that's part of the process where we try and really watch, what guys are doing and monitor them closely to see who's in need of a break and things of that nature. And then an additional winter program, some guys we just identify as, hey, this guy's really killing it on the field, but he's got to get bigger and stronger. So we'll have guys spend the off season basically in Phoenix for the bulk of the time, working with our strength and conditioning staff. And that's where our complex really, the upgrades that ownership had put in a couple of years ago have really paid dividends. We're very blessed on the player development side in terms of having a facility that, number one, you got to kind of shoo guys away to not want to go there. Where in the past it was, you're kind of pleading with them to come in. They're like, no, I got my place back home. I'm going to go to my guy. I got this gym. Well, now it's everybody wants to go to to the new facility, and it's just so nice to work out at. So it's a huge draw for our, especially on our minor league players, heck, big league players, Corbin Burns, Keston Hira, those guys will go in there. You know, being in the Phoenix area a lot, they'll come in early and spend some time there. So it's a definite positive for the organization. And on the player development side, we've been very, very fortunate. And then around the time I skipped one program, this isn't just a Brewer program, obviously it's all 30 clubs, and they didn't have it this year, was the Arizona Fall League. That was well known, you know, people refer to it as kind of a prospect finishing school. It's generally upper level prospects, although the league has gotten a lot younger the last, I would say probably 5 or 6 years. It's gotten quite a bit younger. It's still a good league. It's not a real competitive league in terms of kind of the team concepts. It's more of a showcase. So it's, the scouts love it. They can assess individual players. It's not like a winter ball type environment where guys are really getting after it to try and win games. It's more get your work in, get your innings in, a little more scripted than we would like, but it's still a good opportunity for some guys, probably more hitting, better for position players than pitchers. It's a tough environment, that thin desert air for pitchers to go down there and face some of the hitting they have, but it is a good league. So it's really, you know, one program after another for some of those guys. So some of this is strategy on our end in terms of identifying players for each of these programs outside of course, spring training in the season, of who needs what program, who needs rest. You know, sometimes rest is underrated. That's a valuable component of some of these guys, especially the younger players coming out of high school that don't have that track record of playing a long season. They're going from high school, maybe playing, you know, if weather permits, maybe 30 games and some summer ball games, things of that nature. And then come into pro ball where they're playing potentially 140 game season. So it's really an adjustment, but it's something that I think our guys do a really good job of assessing what a player needs, how they can benefit from it, and try and accelerate that development curve for each individual player.
Tom, I have a question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You were speaking earlier of the educational aspect, so to speak, of teaching language to players. Is that a voluntary thing, or do the players generally want to do it? And what happens if one does not want necessarily learn to speak English?
No, that's a great question. It's one of those things that we would like to have it voluntary, but we know with some of the younger players, there's an ego component. So even some of our non-English speakers that'll come over from Latin America, and they won't want to, just like probably you and I when we were in school, where sometimes you kind of got that little alligator arm where you don't want to really raise your hand and ask a question, say, hey, I don't know something. Or if you leave it up to a lot of our players, and this happens on the field, we teach our coaches how to interact with some players to get through that language barrier early on. So it's basically assume they don't know. So
are the coaches bilingual?
A lot of them are, not all of them. We try and have at least a minimum of one per club. That's another great question, especially at the lower levels. Usually by the time the guys get to AAA, they're pretty, you know, their English is improved pretty much. Occasionally you'll still see it in the big leagues. Guys will use interpreters, and I think that's more of a comfort thing, because even some of the guys we have that use interpreters, I can communicate really well in English with them and have no problem. But I think it's just one of those things. Hey, I'm on TV now. I don't want to make a mistake. So, but getting back to your question, we mandate it. We've gotten even to the point where if players Adela Marquez is basically our education coordinator, based in Phoenix, and travels to the Dominican, goes to our affiliates on occasion as well. And we have like point people that teach English at each of our affiliates. We have a former full-time employee of the Brewers that lives up in the Appleton area. She works with our players up in Appleton. We have somebody like that in all of our spots. But basically, we've gotten to the point where if Adela would come to us and say, hey, Juan isn't coming to the class, he missed 2 in a row, Juan doesn't take batting practice that day. And if it continues, he doesn't play in the game. So we have punishments. And that's how I think for young players, as soon as you start penalizing them in terms of playing time, you don't have to fine them. We don't like to take money out of their pockets, because a lot of times, especially the younger players, they're not signing for much money and not making a lot of money. It's like, hey, you start shortening their playing time or opportunities on the field. And again, we don't like to do that either, because we know it's hurting us in the long run. But I think sending that message early on to make sure the players know, hey, this is important. This isn't optional. It's the right message to send.
And I guess I got one more quick question. I guess it's related, and that is, are these individual lessons or are they group lessons?
It's usually small groups. She'll have classes where it's probably 6 to 8 players in at a time, and she purposely designs them small. But then she'll basically divide them by skill level. So they got the intermediates, the advanced, and then the remedial, levels. And then she'll pull 2 or 3 players aside and have like a small group meeting as well. So it's very often, they're not real long, just because what we found is guys either if you catch them before they go on the field, usually the attention span's a little better. You catch them coming off the field, they're drained and all that. So she tries to keep them short, but she's very good. She's very consistent with her classes, and we've seen very good results so far in terms of players that we've acquired from other organizations, and compare them to guys we've had, and they're in the States the exact same amount of time. And of late, it seems like our guys are a lot further down the road in terms of comprehension and taking instruction. And it's in our instructors, what I was mentioning earlier, on the field, sometimes an infield coach our infield instructor, Bob Missick, pretty good Spanish speaker, and he's learned Spanish from Adela. He's taken the classes on his own, just, hey, I want to learn, I need to talk. Charlie Green grew up in Miami, perfect Spanish, bilingual, perfect English, perfect Spanish. He's a catching guy. Obviously, you're going to have, just by the nature of the position, seems like you have a ton of catchers from Latin America. So he has a trust factor where he can speak their language down in the Dominican when he first meets them until the day they get to the big league. So he's really excelled with that. But we've stressed to our coaches, don't always take the head nod as a yes. The kid may just be embarrassed to say he doesn't understand, he doesn't want to look bad. So they nod their head, and then a coach would have a tendency of seeing the player make the same mistake, saying, hey, he's either not coachable or he doesn't get it. Well, he may just not understand. So we feel that it's the kids that can speak English, certainly it'll accelerate their path to the big league. So it's huge for us.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Tom, we have a question out here from another Tom Bibluski.
Okay.
How does an outside training site like Line Drive,
Drive line, yeah,
or Drive Line,
Yeah.
work with Brewer philosophy? Permitted, discouraged?
Well, that one, the short answer is it's probably encouraged, as long as we're aware of it, so we can be on the same page. Number one, just for common knowledge of injuries or workload, just so a guy's not burning the candle at both ends, where he's doing something on a program away from the park than he's doing with us. But we've gotten to the point where we've kind of come full circle. I remember probably 8 to 10 years ago, it was always looked down upon, the players going elsewhere for help. But I think somewhere along the line, we figured out that, number one, to me, it means the player wants to get better, which a lot of times is half the battle. You got a guy that's very interested in succeeding and wants to improve. So we try and take it as a positive. And then number two, we found that a lot of these places, especially Driveline, really does a nice job. So it's something we can learn from what they've done. They can learn from perhaps what we've done maybe, but the player should be the one that benefits. So we've gone as far as to have a couple of our pitching, their specialty is pitching, obviously at Driveline. And we have a couple of our pitching coaches right now that have worked there in the past that speak highly of it. They know the system inside and out, the teachings that they've had, and we incorporate some of that into our pitching curriculum. So I think it's something that, as long as we know what it is and what the player is after, we can try and work together with whatever entity it is and make sure we're aware of, A, what are you doing? And B, what's your why? Why are you doing this? And then we can work to hopefully get them better. But I found that kids that do that usually are driven and they want to succeed. So it's something that we would definitely embrace.
Interesting. That's not a question I would have anticipated today. So thank you, Tom. That was a great question.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Other questions?
Yeah.
Howard's got one out here that I thought we'd save a little bit. It's a big picture, but if there's more farm, if you don't mind, Howard, holding this off a
Yep.
bit, but farm director related or anything about prospects or how the instructional league went. Any questions along those lines, guys?
I'd like to ask you what diagnostic tests you administer, and are they like standardized tests or are they proprietary?
That's a good one. There's a number of tests. I think there's tests from one area that actually jogged my memory of. I kind of cut our staff short, so I'll just take a little off the beaten path answer here. But when I was talking about Rovers and our team staff, I left out a couple of the other key pillars of our. They're not necessarily in player development, but they certainly work hand in glove with us. Is our medical, our rehab, and our mental skills department, which is sports psych and the like. I think that jogged my memory there in terms of diagnostic tests. And we do a lot of testing just in terms of from our sports psych people, just determining learning style in terms of what type of learners guys are and how our staff can best reach certain players, whether they're having trouble communicating or not. They can use any tricks that they can uncover. And then within different areas of player development, I would say, I think on strength and conditioning, there's a number of tests that they do just as part of their, not so much entrance physical, but just kind of baseline scores, like from different shuttle run times, different jumps, broad jump, things of that nature. For pitchers, we have a watt bike where they can get the speed up really high and the force and things. And, just test different, progress that they've made cardiovascularly or strength wise. So I think there's a number of different tests. I don't know if you had a certain area in mind that you were thinking of, like in terms of the diagnostics. We do a lot in our, on the pitching side, obviously in terms of, biomechanical analysis and, pitch tracking either through TrackMan or Rapsodo. I know we use TrackMan more than Rapsodo, but we have both here. But there's a number of kind of trackings that we do throughout the pitcher's career, really outing from outing. We track everything so we can kind of flag changes in that pitcher's profile and his trajectory through his career.
Well, I was thinking more of like mental personality or mental health testing.
Sure. Yeah, that's more like I referred to earlier, more learning style. It's probably more general. We have a department that meets with the guys and talks through things with them. But in terms of diagnostic testing, I would say that's probably the gist of it there.
I had a question sent over towards me, Tom. How has COVID affected the program overall? I'm not sure if program overall means from the big league down to the minor leagues, but let's start with your player development program. How has COVID affected your program?
No, I think that's a good one. I think like everybody, it's been overall very difficult to deal with. I mean, obviously for players, I can't imagine like a player that was drafted last season, 2019, he basically played that half season, came to spring training, and a couple weeks in, we had him out of there within 48 hours of kind of making a decision to get everybody home. So what we've done is, it would have been easy, and I know just in checking with other clubs and players I know with other clubs as to what may be taking place, I think we're ahead of the industry quite a ways, because as soon as we departed Phoenix, we felt nobody knows how long this is going to be. Obviously, we were all much more optimistic. We thought, okay, by June, we're back here with some sort of spring training and then finish off what's left of the season. And unfortunately, we all know that didn't work out that way. But despite that, what our goal was, as soon as guys went home, the guys that were in camp that had started to ramp up, we had continued to have guys throw and hit and work out on their own where it was safe to do so. Obviously, it varied. We had players in the Seattle area that was, obviously early on was one of the especially hard hit or, peak areas. This guy couldn't leave his house. He was literally pitching into a net at the end of his driveway. But he was able to log it. He was able to get his work in, as best he could. So we basically contacted every player. We divided this up as where our huge staff came into play. And each staff was assigned a certain number of players to find out, okay, what does this player have access to? Do they have a cage? Do they have, a throwing partner just to play catch with? Do they have a catcher? And we kind of got all the constraints for each of our players and worked out within reason a program for each of them. And it really varied. We had areas where there were pockets of minor league guys that would go to the park and hit and pitch to each other. So all things considered, they didn't, fare too badly. They were facing, having live reps and that. The other end of the spectrum was the guy that had basically an old soccer net that he was throwing to at the end of his driveway or something. So it was all over the board, but we wanted to not only have these guys active, but we wanted to measure and track what they were doing so that when we did get back going, we could hit the ground running. So we stayed with that model probably until the end of May. And then we kind of got the suspicion like, hey, what else, what if we don't get going again? We need to have a program. So we put something together that was more team-based, because we noticed when we communicated with our players, they were getting in the physical work, but the team camaraderie was missing. You had one guy in his driveway, you had one guy at a gym by himself. So we basically put all the players that weren't in Appleton at our alternate site, because that was getting going in, June. We had gotten word that was going to get going. So we had left the alternate site guys out, but then we had set up basically a AAA club, AA, and we tried to balance the numbers. So some of our draft picks, we ended up adding to AAA just to balance them off. But the idea was to set up competitive environments for different guys. So send us video of their throwing, skills competition that they could set up, put a camera out and have them hit a target. Just stuff that these guys are competitors. That's what they really thrive off of. So we tried to do a lot of this stuff from afar, where we felt it would benefit the player, but also keep them motivated. And I think that worked out pretty well. That carried us through when the end of the minor league season was. Then we gave them a short period of time off. And then we started a winter, very similar to the phase we did over the summer, but it was more like an off-season program, which guys are going through now. So they're doing more. Some guys are still throwing, but it's going to be more of an off-season strengthening, that type of a program. So I think it really, as an industry, obviously it really hurt everything not having games, because there is no substitute for that. But for the guys that weren't in the alternate site and weren't in instructional league, they at least had this other alternate virtual training that we had set up. So I think guys feel a little bit better. They were in touch with our staff, keeping tabs on them. They feel like they're in a good place. Assuming we start up at some point this spring and have closer to a hopeful normal season, I think guys will be better off for it. The guys that I am ultimately going to be the most concerned about are the pitchers. Being a guy that might have thrown 80 to 100 innings in 2019. Now this year, maybe he only threw 30 innings, but he threw a ton of bullpens. It's going to be hard to calibrate. What is that equivalent to? The ramping up in spring, cooling down, ramping them up again this past summer, and now having a normal season. So that'll be something our staff, our pitching coaches, our trainers will really have to rely on guys to kind of watch guys and make sure they're not doing too much whenever we do get going again, just to keep them healthy, number one, and kind of build back up, back on that path to where they want to be.
Did you see the guys coming in the instructional league almost like an extra step in, or extra little jump in their step, because we're playing baseball, just the excitement of playing baseball again?
Absolutely. And who else? The staff.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Rick Sweet, our AAA manager, hadn't been in instructional league, he said, in like 25 years. He said it was the most fun he's had in years, just being around that environment, partially because he missed the season for the first time in forever, but then also, just being around and forgetting how good instructional league was from a youth perspective. You got 16, 17-year-old Latin American kids playing, you got freshly drafted players, and you got a few older kids, older by the 24, 25, if that's old. I guess it's not, but anyway. But yeah, we saw, I think in a normal year, instructional league is something that you always try and push the energy level, where you want guys to show a lot of energy, and naturally it's coming off of a lot of times their first full season. So guys have kind of hit that wall and then some, and then we get them down to Phoenix for 3-4 weeks. Well, this year they didn't have the season, So coming in for a 6-week instructional league program, it was just the opposite. It was almost like that mentality in spring training where guys were just glad to be out of the house and get outside and play. So I don't think to a man anybody expected us to have it. And then when we did, it was just a perfect storm of energy from the guys.
I remember emails with you several months ago when you were just starting to talk about it. It looked like it was coming up, and the first email you said, "I think we may have something going. We're working on it now." And I think a few weeks after that, "Yep, we got it going. So we're putting it off." Did you? Which was great. It was good to hear. Was there any type, because of COVID, were there any additional steps you had to take with the players so you kept them in camp and kept them healthy?
Yeah, we did a series. We basically, I think we learned from what they did in Milwaukee and in Appleton in terms of like meals were all boxed lunches. We have a cafeteria there that normally you go through like a buffet style almost. And this was all, you basically, masks were a requirement. It was a no doubt. You had to wear the mask. We did testing multiple times a week to stay on top of that. And then anything we normally did inside the building, with the exception of, a guy going to his locker to change, that was literally all they should have been doing inside. And then everything else was outside. We would have our morning staff meeting at 7:00 was in the big league batting cages. We just raised up the netting, put chairs spaced out in there. We had Charlie Green kind of running our meeting, daily schedule, and we just sat outside in the batting cage and had our meeting. Players would meet on the field. They'd get inside, grab some food. We'd have them in tents outside on the walkways. I think it was well done. We learned a lot the way they did it at Miller Park in terms of the player dining. They had players were eating on the field level concourse this year, just on tables that were really, 9-foot round tables with 3 guys max or something, just trying to space them out. Obviously the virus can't leap that far and it's outdoors. So it's doing the best you can under the circumstances, but it worked out really well.
Tom, my question, going back to, this would relate to the players in Appleton, in other words, the alternative site, and the relationship with the big league club. My question is there anything from there that you learned this year that was maybe even more effective or better than what you usually did? And my background for this is, as people on this call know, I'm the White Sox fan. I'm from Chicago. I'm a White Sox fan.
We tolerate them.
My impression was, yeah, they tolerate me. But my impression watching the White Sox all year, and with the same development staff and with like the same level of talent across some really talented prospects, some others, so what? My impression is they had to cycle through a lot of players. And this year, when those guys came to the big league club, they were noticeably better prepared than what I was used to seeing. I would have expected the opposite. And I don't know if there was anything that people are learning, like, we don't, this is better or something.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that in our case, we definitely learned a lot about how, like, going into it, I don't think anybody really knew what to expect. Like, I was talking to our staff, explaining that, hey, you're going to be up there for 3 months roughly. There's going to be no fans. You can't play any other teams. It's all inter squads, and it was just silence from our staff. Like, they were excited to, like the guys coming to instructs, they were excited to get out of the house and get back to baseball. But at the same time, they're like, man, how are we going to keep these guys happy? So, but honestly, it turned out, I wouldn't say a mixed bag, but some highlights in there. Like, for instance, a high draft pick from 2019, Antoine Kelly, the big lefty. He was a junior college pitcher out of Chicago and pitched in Arizona, pitched 1 game in Appleton, didn't do so well in the 1 start he had in Appleton in 2019. Well, he went to the alternate site as a prospect, no chance of coming to the big leagues, and we literally laid out goals for each of the players that were there. And his was as simple as, hey, let's get this guy used to pitching every 5th day. He never did it in high school. He'd pitch once a week, junior college similarly. He couldn't really come back from throwing in between starts very well. He's like, my shoulder, elbow, I'm just not used to it. Not pain, just, hey, I'm not ready to throw yet. Well, I tell you what, our pitching coordinator, Cam Castro, I never forget him walking outside talking on the phone. He's like, if we can just get him to throw every 5th day. And I'm like, if we can do that, that'll be a success. Well, he had that mastered probably in about 3 weeks. once we explained, hey, this is your goal, this is what you're going to try and do, he fought through it early on and did it. And then all of a sudden it was like the guy went to a different level where I think being in Appleton every day, he's a really different kid in terms of he's focused, but he's like, I think being a youngster, you guys can get distracted. Hey, I got a road trip or there's visiting fans. Well, this guy's coming to the park. All he had to worry about was himself. And he just took off. It was unbelievable. I'd drive up there at least once a week to watch one of the inter squad games, talk to the guys. And he was noticeably outing to outing, just, really, really, I don't know that I've seen that kind of progress in a minor league season out of a player like this. I mean, it was really remarkable to see, like his stuff. He was throwing, touching some 98s from the left side. He's a huge 6'6", 6'7" lefty, slider, changeup. So really good looking package of ability. That's why our scouts took him where they did. But I think in that case, I don't know that we'd want to repeat an alternate site setup. I think we need the games for everything, for obvious reasons. But at the same time, that may be something we can learn from. That the way our staff did it, they would have one of the players doing the PA announcing to give it some energy. Bobby Wall was the resident DJ up there. He would be, half comedian, half PA announcer. He did an unbelievable job putting music on. They had the TrackMan velocity exit velos on the scoreboard so guys could see that immediate feedback. And they would just do different things that really push these guys. They tried to be creative. For instance, like some nights they didn't have enough for a 9-inning inter squad. They would have 5 innings. Well, they'd get our coaches out there to pitch. Well, coaches versus 98 isn't going to be a big deal. Well, Jim Henderson was one of the coaches. Well, then they moved the ramp up. So instead of pitching from the mound, he's pitching from 45 feet, throwing, high 80s, which probably translates, to 100 miles an hour or whatever it is. So, then it was a competition. Guys couldn't hit off the coaches, and the banter started going. And I think it really, showed us some things where you could hold these guys' interests for the full game because they knew that was coming up after, and just different things. I think you're onto something there. I think there were some pieces now when players would come up to the big leagues. That's when we had our kind of fingers crossed. We're like, because we didn't really have that track record of, hey, he's had 3 really good outings, or he's hitting this type of pitching, but some of the guys did well. Obviously our hitting was crazy this year in terms of just not a lot of offense at the big league level. So it was hard to judge whether it was, we'd see Mark Mathias come up and he'd swing the bat really well, but our big league guys were scuffling. So I don't know if it was just that he stood out or they were scuffling so bad, but anyway, something interesting to ponder.
Dave Weller's got a question. Here's a good one, and he's the guy who's going to ask this question. Tom, are there data analytics involved in the minor league operation, or are they just at the major league level?
That's a great question. That's one I left off, and I mentioned the other departments that aren't necessarily in PD, but they influence us. I think they definitely are considered, but I think our baseball operation as a group does a really good job of leaning on the people for their expertise. So in other words, I'm not a R&D guy or analyst, so I need to give my opinion based on my expertise. But now when you combine that with our analyst or our experts, now maybe you can find some commonality, or you can really get a good judgment on what you're seeing or what you're trying to do. So in other words, I think David Stearns brings this in. Like our scouts, he wants them to scout, and then the guys that analyze the numbers can do that parallel to them. So now he can listen to both and draw from each of them their opinion instead of being influenced. If a scout knows that, hey, the numbers are really good on this guy, there's something there that I'm not seeing. Well, it would be better if that scout didn't fudge his evaluation. He should still give his proper evaluation to the best of his ability, and then let the numbers fall where they may. So I think, to answer your question, the place we use them the most on the minor leagues is they assist us in developing player plans. So our R&D people and analysts are very good at looking at a player and looking at batted ball rates, where do they hit the ball hardest, what type of pitch does a pitcher have the most success with, and basically telling us, hey, once a guy hits a certain point in the minor leagues, if he hasn't mastered this pitch, maybe now's the time we should talk about scrapping that pitch and having him throw the go-to pitch that much more. You know, maybe the guy, and you're seeing this in the big leagues, you're seeing, 2-0 breaking balls and, 3-0 breaking balls, guys that in the old days, it was fastball, you're not going to walk it. Well, now you're seeing all kinds of, basically you used to call it pitching backwards. Well, now you're having where you can have success. You're trying to utilize that pitch selection to your advantage. So I think we utilize them, but it's something that if you follow me, we try and keep separate so that our scouts and our development people don't become analysts and vice versa. But I think that's where I think David's kind of brought this mindset where he can maximize the utility of each. He can get the most out of each person and kind of listen to what he hears in each and then make the best decision by getting that true opinion from each of the 2, maybe 3 people that have weighed in, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Another question, I got it here, it's written out here someplace. How often do you get down to the Dominican Republic Baseball Academy? Can you tell us a little about that structure there?
Sure. No, that's a great question. I get down there probably for sure 2 times a year, probably more likely 3. However, since COVID, the last time I was there was December, like end of November of 19. I went down there for basically the Dominican Instructional League. They'll have the Instructional League in the US, which some of our Latin players come over for, but then we have another program in the DR at our facility. So generally probably 2 to 3 trips, and they're probably short trips, usually 5-6 days in length. And in actuality, with the volume of players there, you have to do a lot of homework before you go down. And it's more to visit with the staff that's there and check in with them than it is actually evaluating our players, just because in 6 days you're trying to evaluate 60 players. You may see a pitcher start one game or a reliever pitch, 2 appearances of an inning each. So it's good feedback, kind of monitoring how things are going, how our staff is interacting, things of that nature. But basically just the 30,000 foot view, and you guys can drill down if you got more questions here, but basically it's we call it the Dominican Training Complex. So there's dorms, there's a cafeteria, bathroom, showers, a little bit of recreation, not a ton at the facility we're at, in one building. So basically it's a one-stop shop where a player from Venezuela would fly into the Dominican. He would get taken to the complex and he would be in a dorm with 2 or 3 other players, bunk beds or big room with a bunch of beds in it, room wise. So I think 4 in a room would be the max, but in any event, there's dorms for the players. So they do everything on site. They go to bed, they get up, they have breakfast right in the cafeteria. They go out and they have their workout, come in and have lunch, go out for a game if there's a program going on, or if it's their Dominican Summer League season, which mirrors like a rookie ball, like an Arizona Summer League season. And after the game, they'll eat dinner. They might have English classes in the evening or in the morning if there's no game, depending. And then they'll do a snack in the evening, and then it's lights out. And there's internet, there's some video games, there's some books, different things, movies they can do at the complex. But it's pretty base level, and it is it's something where it's really different down there. There's 2 fields directly outside the dorms. So from the kids' dorms, they can see the baseball fields right there. It's not like they have to travel far. And what you'll find is the guys that are playing in the game and the guys that aren't playing, as soon as lunch is over, the guys that aren't in the game, they're out watching the game. There's not a ton to do, but they really like the sport. So these kids are out there, watching their teammates, not cheering like fans maybe, but at least, taking it all in. So, and the location we're at is actually, we lease a facility from Solomon Torres, former Brewer. He had built 3 different facilities in San Pedro de Macorís, which is where we're at. We're about 25 minutes from Boca Chica, where there's an area called Baseball City. And that's basically where there's probably 15 organizations that have facilities in a short amount of, or a tight distance there. And the Brewers are in the process of building a new facility down there. It's on hold, as is everything, it seems, right now with COVID, but it's going to be a facility right next to where the Cleveland Indians are. there's plans drawn up, no shovel in the ground necessarily yet, but that's kind of in the pipeline in the next several years to hopefully be able to move into a new facility, bigger dorms, a little bit bigger footprint. I left out before when I talked, there are a couple classrooms in there where the English classes and other classes are held in this facility. So it's really like a little boarding school in a way for baseball, but we try and utilize it as best we can. Obviously the food's a priority because, you know, it's really a poor country. The food, the nutrition that a lot of these kids have coming up, there's low hanging fruit, pardon the pun, in terms of just getting them fed properly and filling out. Because in the past, we used to have guys come to the States. The player would be 175, 180 pounds. He'd go home for the winter. And if we weren't careful, he'd come back in 10, 15 pounds lighter just because he wasn't eating correctly, eating enough, whatever, when he's back home. So that's something that we've tried to take advantage of, this complex where guys can be there year round. So if they're in the States and then in the winter, we have a winter program there so they can get fed at the complex. They can use the weight room facilities. They can take some swings, pitch, whatever they need to do. So it's a good opportunity for these kids really to keep them safe. Number one, it's all secure facility and, you know, 24/7 baseball opportunities and educational opportunities there for them.
Other questions, guys?
You may, to follow up on that, Tom, you used the phrase lights out. That raised something in my mind. Is this pretty disciplined situation where they go to bed when you tell them to go to bed, rather than sit around and talk till 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, that's one big thing you hit on there, that word discipline. That's one thing that it's something that I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but we have to be extremely disciplined at the facility, like a lot of rules. You know, if you give them too much slack down there, as soon as I'm getting ahead of myself here. My assistant, Eduardo Brizuela, he ran the complex for 3 years. He lived at the facility, handled all the operations, and I worked with him closely back then when he was down in the Dominican, and he's a really good worker, really does a really good job for us now. And he basically stressed that. It was kind of an eye opener to me. He's like, hey, you gotta have not an iron fist or anything like that. Like sometimes it's explaining to these guys why we do certain things, but in terms of the mentality, their mentality is when they get to the complex, their main goal is to get to the United States. And a lot of them, when they get to the States, there's a little bit of a regression because in their mind, they made it. They've flown over to the States and now they have all this freedom. They're living either in a hotel or our team apartments. They can go walk over to the mall at Westgate and go to Chipotle on their own or whatever. And it's small things, but to them, they can't believe it. You know, it's night and day from the Dominican Republic. A lot of these kids grew up extremely poor. So we have to, in a humane way, just educate them how important it is to stay disciplined. Because as sad as this one hit me the hardest. When you're over there watching a Dominican Summer League game, these kids don't know any other way than hustle. There's no bat flips. There's no showmanship. It's like, you know, pop up, he's sprinting to first. Well, a lot of times what we've run into, and this was a huge eye opener to me, was when young Latin American players come to the States, they start to slow down running to first because they feel pressure. They're showing up the American teammates. So when they pop up a ball, they're done. I'm like, I couldn't believe that. It took me years to figure it. I'm like, no way. That's not how they think. But they think they're going to get put down for showing them up sprinting to first. So I'm like, no, they got it wrong. Keep sprinting to first. We'll get the other guys to sprint to first. That's our job. So anyway, it's something that you got to kind of, it works both ways. We have to learn about them. They have to learn about us. But I think it's that jump from the Dominican, whether they're Venezuelan kids, Dominican, or whatever, just coming to a new country at that age, it's unbelievable. Like 18 years old, I couldn't imagine myself going to Latin America and saying, hey, here you go. You can live in this hotel room and, you know, show up at the park, take the bus, whatever. You know, it's got to be a 180-degree change in terms of freedoms that they're used to. So it's something that I get nervous when we bring these guys over, and that's where Adela Marquez, our education coordinator, and some of our staff is kind of we have people that don't have the title like Latin American liaison, but they really look after the kids. We'll take them to when they first get here, they need social security numbers so that we can pay them and give them meal money. So they'll take them to the social security office. They'll take them to a grocery store just on a fake run. Just, hey, this is how you buy food, produce, healthy food. They'll talk to a nutritionist that's bilingual just to make sure they're not eating. Hey, if you're going to go to McDonald's, which we know you guys are going to do on occasion, we don't encourage it, but mix in a McDonald's salad or get this type of chicken sandwich that's grilled or something, you know, something that's a little bit healthier, just to give them an option. And we know that when push comes to shove and we're not there, they may buy the Big Mac, but you know, we try and tell them, if we have to tell them 15 times before it kicks in, hopefully it kicks in on that 16th time. So.
Cool. Tom, are you okay with staying on a little longer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Howard put this question out there a little earlier, and so let's, this might bring up some conversations amongst everybody out here. What are your thoughts on contraction in the minor leagues, and how has it affected the Brewers?
Sure. No, that's a great question. That's something that we really don't know what's going to happen, other than, you know, myself just following kind of all the things that you read online, the talking points that you hear in terms of reducing different levels of baseball, or possibly reducing by the rookie advance level, for instance. And they talk about possibly some cities losing a minor league club. And obviously from a player development perspective, we would probably go the other direction. We'd want to add clubs, just because we always feel there's something more in that player. We're probably the last person, the last group in baseball that wants to give up on a player, because we get to know him the best and see him the longest. So generally, if we know the guy can do something well, we've seen it if anybody has. So, you know, I'm probably biased in that regard. I'm probably anti-contraction from that perspective. Now, on the other hand, not trying to play both sides, but I do know from a facility standpoint, there are some facilities, and we've been, as a brewer, you know, a longtime brewer, we've been stuck in some really tough situations, whether it be AAA Colorado Springs in terms of the weather element, the altitude, trying to develop pitching there, where we've had to make baseball decisions and really have a hard conversation. Do we send Josh Hader to Colorado Springs, or do we leave him in Biloxi? You know, and say, hey, what helps the pitcher more? Obviously it worked out in his case, but a lot of guys that could be, you know, they could be on the edge of, is this guy a prospect or not? And he goes there and he goes the wrong direction because of the, some balls that were harmless fly balls, or they're bloopers that end up being triples or doubles because it's, 440 down the line or whatever it is, or 380 down the line. But in any event, I think for the industry, I think the reasoning to have contraction is a good one. I think it's going to allow probably to get a little bit more normalcy back to what the minor leagues are all about. So I think the quality of the facilities that any given player or staff member will be in are probably going to be, boosted up, because I'm sure the teams that are going to be eliminated are probably the facilities that are the furthest gone. Now, that said, there's probably a place in the game for all of those facilities. In other words, I know Colorado Springs is a site that we have it was in rookie advance. Now, we didn't care for it for AAA. We made it work, but for rookie advance, which was where the Helena Brewers moved, Rocky Mountain or the Colorado Springs Park was perfect for that. The weather wasn't a factor because we didn't play in April and May. They drew really good crowds, which is always good, to see how the players respond with the pressure element of getting some fans in the stands. So it was great for rookie ball. I really liked it. Now, there's probably a place for that league affiliated with baseball in some regards. It may not be a true affiliate where you're going to put 35 Brewer prospects there, but could it be a summer league equivalent to Cape Cod, where major league scouts identify players that go play there? Now it's a little bit different. If I'm a fan of the Rocky Mountain vibes, I've always had this argument myself when I go on the road to see our teams. I sometimes jokingly, or not jokingly, but just, I always ask fans, like, hey, who are you here to see? Oh, I'm here to see the Jacksonville Suns. Oh yeah, who are they the parent club of? And they always name whatever big league team is closest. When we were the Colorado Springs Sky Sox, everybody thought they were with the Rockies. Now they used to be with the Rockies, but my point is, I think people just want to see baseball to some degree. If it happens to be the hometown team's feeder club, great. But at the same time, I think there's probably a place for some level of baseball in all these communities, because I think it does hurt the sport if there's less baseball, no question. It's just a matter of what level do fans want to see. Obviously, the diehards I know we lost some fans in Colorado Springs when it went from AAA to rookie ball. It's just their preference. Some of those fans were, hey, I want older players. I want closer to the big league type stars. Other fans thought, hey, this is great. I can be a host family for, the next Brewer star that comes through Rocky Mountain, whoever that may be. So I think that, to answer your question, I would be personally against it, but I can see what MLB is doing. They're trying to raise the quality of the development pipeline, so that I think if there's more stability, for instance, since I've been here, we've been in,
Yeah.
depending on how far back you go, New Orleans, Denver, Indianapolis. I think we were in Louisville for one season, Nashville. Then we were bounced out of Nashville, Colorado Springs. So it's like, if we were in one place, maybe the Brewers can make a little bit more investment in that facility. Hey, the video room, we know we're going to be there 10 years. Let's pump some money in the video room so our players can benefit. Whereas now I'd be afraid to spend much, because you could be out of there in 2 years or 4 years. So if that makes sense, I think it's probably sound reasoning, but hopefully the cities that had teams still have some level of baseball once once the dust settles.
What was the reason behind, you mentioned in minor league facilities, of the Brewers buying a minor league team?
That was
Running it.
I think it was back in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, 17 or 18. I forget which year it was.
Yeah.
But if you remember, we were in Colorado Springs at the time, and our partnership was with the Brevard County Manatees, was our high A classification, and they were being forced out of their stadium in Brevard. I think it was Women's Baseball Federation had bought the whole facility to use in Melbourne. So they had to move, and they wanted to potentially sell the club or partner with a team that had spring training in Florida. And I think they ended up going with the Braves, because the Braves had to get out of the Walt Disney World complex. I think it was the Braves, if I remember correctly. But we knew we were not going to be partnered with them. And it looked like in this game of musical chairs, it's really tough you can only talk to teams once they become free agents. And we try to go by the book on that. And every year it was like, you're hearing rumors of, hey, we're out of here, you're out of there. And it basically came down to the Lancaster Jethawks of the California League or the Carolina Mudcats. And Lancaster is worse than Colorado Springs in terms of home run rate. It's just, you look in the box scores, there'll be a 30-10 game every year, at least once. And Houston happened to be in Lancaster, and David Stearns was in Houston, and he's like, hey, I don't think we wanted any part of Lancaster, just for the baseball operation, nothing against the city, the league, anything like that. It was just, when you talk about developing pitching being a priority for us, and then having to work around 2 of your 4 full season clubs, that would be pretty tough. That would be, you'd promote guys from Wisconsin to Biloxi, and then you'd be kind of stuck in there. So Carolina ended up being for sale around that time. So I think our owner stepped up and said, hey, basically help us stay out, do the best for our development pipeline and keep us out of that California league, give us some stability. And it's really a nice setup developmentally. And it's a kind of there's not a lot of, I think it's an up and coming area. There's a lot of expansion. North Carolina, very fast growing, the Raleigh-Durham area, and this area where the ballpark is, there really isn't a lot out there yet, but it's got a chance to grow pretty well. So it's a good setup developmentally for us.
Cool. Question here from Jack Leibel. Hey, Tom, in regards to player development, what are the challenges and advantages of being a small market team like the Brewers in contrast to the big market teams like the Yankees and Dodgers?
That's a good question. I'll go back to our scouting days. My previous role, a couple of roles ago, was the assistant scouting director. We used to use that as a huge selling point. I think our scouts still do, in terms of if you're a scout trying to sign a player, trying to convince mom and dad why they should sign now is one thing, but then who they should sign with. We were able to sell them on the likelihood that they would be a homegrown player for us, as opposed to a trade piece with another team. Obviously, we've made some trades, so there's certainly no absolutes. We've traded a lot of players that we've drafted and developed, but I think there is a component to that where if you're with the Yankees or Dodgers, although the Dodgers and Yankees have both done a nice job too, so it's changed some, but I think that's you always want to try and spin things to the positive, certainly, and that's something we try to do in terms of our fans seem to have a good bond with the minor leagues. I've noticed that in talking to other farm directors, just talking to our fans, it seems like they really take an interest in the minor leagues here, maybe more than other cities. So I think there is that bond where, I'll date myself, but going back to when Corey Hart came up and, was kind of that next wave of prospects in the early 2000s and came up for a game and struck out. And I think he ended up getting 2 or 3 standing ovations during the same at bat. He hit a long foul ball, just missed a home run. And then he struck out and they gave him another standing ovation. So I think that's something that we try and spin it into a positive, but I think the players do respect that where they know that, hey, if it comes to Garrett Cole signing with the Yankees or Brewers, he's probably going to sign with the Yankees. It's not going to be in our salary structure probably to take on a contract like that, all things being equal. Granted, we just stepped up and signed Yelich, not quite for Cole money, but for a good number. So.
As a farm director, what's your role in the draft? Do you play any role in that at all?
It's very, very minimal. It's to the point of I'm sensitive, I think, from my scouting days. I'm not saying anybody wants my help in the draft these days, but I don't see any of the amateur players. So it would be unfair to even have an opinion on most guys. Now, the small area that I would have would be once we reach a point in the draft where they're not drafting for best available, and generally we lean on that pretty deep in the draft, but there is a point where you hit hey, it might be the 17th 20th round and they're looking at certain players. Well, if we've just like this past year we drafted 5 college players, a couple outfielders in the group. Well, in a normal season when they're all playing right away, we want to make sure there's playing time for these guys. So if they see him as a bona fide big leaguer, like, hey, pound the table, this guy's a big leaguer, we'll take him, we'll figure it out. We'll get him at bats. But if it gets to a point in the draft where, hey, we have a rookie ball team, we don't have a third baseman, is there a shortstop you like that we can play at third, or is there something it's very, very minimal. It's more of an operational component once you reach a point in the draft where, hey, you're long past the high ceiling players available. It's what do we need? That if anything, that would be the extent of it now. But our scouts, they're locked in from probably the summer before the draft heavily on that class of players. They're out there now watching video and talking to players virtually, doing home visits, things of that nature. So they're so far down the road on these guys that they really have a good handle on them and certainly can pretty much get deep in the draft before they would lean on us for much at all.
So if someone doesn't like the draft, they can't be complaining about you. So we can defend you. They start saying that damn farm director. So, oh no, not Tom. Tom's in the clear there. So yeah, we got your back on that one.
Exactly. I do have a good, I know you guys like stories, or that's what Dennis told me. I do got one from the draft. Some of you may have heard it. I think it got out there before, but back in my assistant days in 2001, it was the first year in Miller Park. JJ Hardy was our 2nd round pick. And he was a guy all spring that we liked. And I think we call it helium when a guy starts to really move up the board. And this guy really started to play well. Even though he's a Tucson kid and he played plenty of baseball because of the weather, he really, got on our scouts' radar heavily. Like he was on the radar, but he really took off. So we used to have we still have a pre-draft workout at the stadium. And in 2001, Hardy was one of the guys there. And it was a Saturday night game against the Cubs that was sold out. I think it was at the time one of our attendance records, like 40 before the fire marshal capped it. I think it was like 46,000 or something. But nevertheless, this workout, we had way too many amateur players at it. And Hardy was one of them. So the big league guys were starting to dress and come out to stretch, and we were still taking swings with guys on the field. And JJ Hardy was a guy, but during that workout, he just put on a show. He's hitting balls above the Fridays like nothing. We knew he could hit a home run, but he was just he was just a man among boys at this workout. Skinny little shortstop, high school kid, and he's booming balls. He's making all the plays defensively. Chasing balls down, spinning throws the first. He's just wowing our guys. And our area scout did a nice job, and our West Coast cross checker basically learned that he was supposed to catch a flight Saturday night to St. Louis to be at the Cardinals workout, which was on Sunday, which is very common. A lot of teams have these workouts. Well, we had a little gamesmanship, and I was kind of new as my second full season as the assistant. And our scouting director told me this, and I'm just kind of like, what's happening here? Well, Rod Carew was our big league hitting coach, I believe, that year. And somebody came up with this story like, hey, tell Hardy that Carew wants to talk to him. He wants to throw to him in the batting cage and watch him hit, trying to stall him so he can miss his flight. So sure enough, Rod Carew comes out, puts his arm around him. Hey, kid, tell me about it. Let me see your swing. Let's go in the cage. The big leagues are introducing themselves to him. He goes in the cage and he hits, forgets all about his flight to St. Louis. So the agent was all upset, called our scout, chewed him out about he knew what he was doing, and the rest is history. The Cardinals liked him, but we took him. I think he was like 48th overall, or he would have been our first round pick if Mike Jones hadn't been there. Jones had some injuries. We liked him. We took him, I think, 12th in the first round or 11th, something like that. And then Hardy was the next magnet on our board. So if Jones was gone, Hardy was going in the first round. And then we patiently waited until the pick came up in the second round and took him. That was how Rod Carew helped the Brewers draft JJ Hardy, I guess.
And I don't think anybody on this call really minds that you did it to the Cardinals. I think most of us
Yeah.
would probably applaud that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wonderful.
No doubt.
When we were talking yesterday, I asked you a little about scouting and all, and you were talking about how Jack Zarednik took you under his wing and really taught you a lot. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, he was, as I mentioned yesterday, he was, when I started, I was I came out of the clubhouse very, very conscious of who I was. I was like happy to be there. And I was basically just got my degree from UW Milwaukee in basically computer information or IT. And our computer department was a one-man band. So I had started to work for the computer guy when the team was on the road, and worked in the clubhouse when the team was in town. Well, then one thing led to another during the Sal Bando regime, and he hired me as, basically a baseball ops assistant. I think was my coordinator of baseball information, something corny title that basically I did anybody that needed computer help in baseball. I was the guy. So I got to know everybody, and one thing led to another. And after the '99 season is when Dean Taylor came in and hired Jack Zarensic as the scouting director. I didn't really know Jack. I knew the name, and he wanted to have an assistant and ended up hiring me probably 6 months or so into his tenure as his assistant. I give Jack a lot of credit in terms of just throwing everything at me, seeing what would stick, what would stick and what I could handle, what I couldn't handle. And I would always scratch my head. I was telling Dennis on the call yesterday, like some of the things he would ask me to do, I'm thinking, I have no experience doing this, but it was his way of, hey, throw him in the fire, see if he can handle it. And as the assistant scouting director I think a lot of what I did then is still the way the job's done today, but I know teams do it differently. But basically the way I did it then, I was the home base. So I wasn't out scouting. I wasn't holding up the gun, watching guys day after day. I would certainly see games, but it was a small fraction of what I did, partially because there was so much work to be done as the draft got closer that being in Milwaukee, you really couldn't scout outdoors much until at best case April sometime, unless you're going down south to follow teams that were playing on their spring trip and things. So by the time the weather got good where you could see players in the Midwest, it was too busy getting ready for the draft in terms of lining up meetings, making sure all our boxes were checked in terms of, different tests we would do on guys, vision tests, psych tests, making sure final reports were in, all that stuff, making sure we had video on guys lined up for the meetings. And And then the benefit was I was in all the meetings, so I could hear all of our scouts talk about each player that we took and hear different opinions, who liked them, who didn't like them, that type of thing. So I give Jack a lot of credit because he was just a 24/7 baseball guy. I remember when the year we drafted Braun, basically came down to Braun or Tulowitzki. And I was probably leaning more Tulowitzki. He was more the known commodity. I happened to see him in spring in person. I didn't see Braun in person. And it was one of those years where your backup was a pretty nice pick, as opposed to the year where you're arguing over two guys that neither one had a great career. Two guys had, Braun probably had the better career, but Tulowitzki, pretty nice career in his own right. But I remember the Braun draft because that was 2005. So he was, six. I think 2000 was Jack's first draft with us. In 2005, he was relentless in terms of getting extra opinions and asking everybody. He would communicate with everybody. He would go to games and he would ask the high school basketball coach, "Hey, tell me about what kind of kid is this kid?" No stone left unturned was his motto. He would ask everybody, but he had a really good filter in terms of parsing out what was important for him, what he needed to hear, what he didn't need to hear. And I remember when we drafted Braun, he was running, back in the old DVD days, he was running down to the clubhouse asking our hitting coaches, "Hey, look at these two swings." He was just relentless in terms of trying to get just added looks and making sure, not that you're ever 100% right, but he was as good as I've seen in terms of just staying on guys and asking and kind of had a feel for what he wanted to do. I mentioned to Dennis, one of his mantras was when you were picking higher in the draft, like probably in the first 5-10 picks, he always wanted to get the best something. I never really asked him why, but his mentality was like, "Hey, I want the best hitter in the draft. I want the best power in the draft, best left-handed pitcher." Like, I think for him, he always saw it as, hey, there's going to be some hits and misses. I don't want the third best left-handed pitcher when I'm picking seventh. I want the best of something. If two teams have passed on this lefty, they might have seen something I've missed, or what are the odds you're going to have 3 stud lefties right in a row in the draft? So that, I don't know if he was playing the odds, if there's such a thing or what, but I really respected the way he went about it. He would be just on a mission. The other story I would say is, kind of illustrating this is, I don't know if you guys remember right-handed pitcher, our White Sox fan will remember him, Gavin Floyd, big curveball. Well, he was pitching, high school pitcher out east, Maryland, Virginia, I forget where, high school kid, but he flew in 2001 in probably the end of April. Jack flew in from the airport on like a Monday or Tuesday, and he calls me from the airport, "Hey, what time's the press room close?" He's hungry. This was too passionate, scouting and grabbing something to eat. But he's like, "Hey, what time does the press room close?" I'm like 7:30, whatever time, didn't matter. He goes, "Who's pitching for the Rockies? Is it still Darryl Kyle?" And I said, "Yes." So he goes, "All right." He comes in, he parks his car. He goes, "Meet me in the lobby." I walk him to the scout seats right behind the plate. He wants to see Darryl Kyle's curveball because his comparison for Gavin Floyd was Darryl Kyle. They were both kind of across their body, big power curveball. So he was concerned. He had just seen Floyd on the couple days before, the day before. He was nervous about him breaking down with his shoulder. So he wanted to see how across his body was. Overarching this whole story, this is the inaugural year of Miller Park. He has never seen a game in Miller Park. His office has been in the building since 2000 or whenever they went through December of 2000. He walked from the offices in the right field corner to home plate, never looked up one time at the roof. If that doesn't symbolize like how locked in this guy was, he sits down. He sits down. He watched 3 pitches. He got one curveball from Darryl Kyle, and he goes, "That's perfect. That's just like Gavin Floyd. Let's go eat." He turns around mid-inning, and I go, "Jack, do you want to see the roof?" He looks up. He goes, "Oh, that's nice. Go eat." This guy was like locked in on this curveball. But anyway, that's a good story about him.
Michael Halpert has a question out here. What kind of trade-off do you make between filling minor league rosters with young prospects versus adding some veteran players who can act as mentors to the prospects?
That's another good question. There's some good questions here. I think at the end of the day, out of respect to our scouts and out of respect to the players, we always go with the guy that we still has the best chance of getting to the big leagues. So if guys are right there, hey, this is a nice guy in the club. He might put up a little more numbers this year, but he's probably 3 years older and we feel he's topped out. We'll still take the guy with the ceiling if we feel there's a chance of him being a big league prospect. Just because you never know on guys. There's been, as an organization, there's always that guy that you release or you give up on, and you're like, man, I didn't think the guy, you're always hoping you pull for these guys as much as their parents, but you just, at the end of the day, trying to be realistic, hey, you make a judgment. And we always try and, hey, the scout drafted this guy for a reason. He's a little bit younger. He's got that ceiling. Let's push him and ride him another year and see what happens. So I think you always go with the prospects, but there's also that component. I know what the question is about. If you have a team, I remember I think it was 2017. Yeah, 2017. I think it was our first year. Whatever our first year in Carolina was, we had a really prospect laden club, and they ended up winning probably 80 games combined, but didn't make the playoffs. They were solid each half, but just missed the playoffs that year. And looking back on it, every position, we did not have one veteran kind of carrier. So I think there's always that argument of how much would those prospects have learned if they would have had, a 26-year-old guy playing, 400 at bats, 300 at bats. So he's kind of showing them the way. It's the unwritten, there's no way to really gauge it, but I think there is an aspect of that. But to make up for it, we try and put that on our coaches, where it's like, hey, we have some young coaches that are not too far away from playing. Hopefully that we can rely on them to help, finish off these prospects and round them into the mentality that veteran, quote unquote, minor leaguer would have provided.
Okay. We're at the 90-minute mark. Thank you, Tom, for your time. Any last questions? Anybody have?
You're welcome.
If not, I would like to say thank you. I'm seeing applause going out there. Oh, I'm seeing thank you even coming across on the process.
Right.
Excellent, Tom. I've got page and a half of notes. I write a lot of notes, so when I do the when I do the newsletter, so I can at least try to put something in there, so it made it look like I paid attention. But this is excellent,
Right.
Tom. I appreciate that. If you ever need any help with this from SABR, don't be afraid to give us a call. We're always around.
No, absolutely. Enjoyed it, guys. Great questions. I know it's a weird subject, and I hope I didn't bore you with any of the farm system. I tried to blow through it quick to open it up for your questions. There were some good ones. So I appreciate the time, everybody.
Yeah, comments out
All
here.
right.
This was a fascinating discussion. Thanks for your time. Great meeting. This was fabulous. Thanks so much, Tom. So, yep, yeah, you're a hit. Thank you very much.
Awesome. All right, guys. I appreciate the time. Thanks. Go
Thank you,
Brewers.
everybody.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you, everybody. Comments on meeting for December would be helpful. And send me email on that, and we'll see you guys December 9th. Okay.
Bye.
Any questions, anybody? See ya. Thanks, guys.
Giving to everybody.
What was that?
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks. Oh, that's right. Yeah, thank you. Happy Thanksgiving. Glad you're thinking about it, Howard. Can always count on you. Take care.
You too.